on? You just tell me. That's great. All right, well, thanks for joining us here today. Today I wanted to give you a bit of an update on recent enforcement activity by the State Penalties Enforcement Agency, as well as the outstanding results from our debt recovery and compliance program. I want to, at the outset, acknowledge Kim Easton, who's with me today, as well as officers of SPUR. They do outstanding work for us, recovering money for Queenslanders. People who owe money to Queenslanders should pay their debts, and SPUR officers have been very successful in their work throughout Queensland, and I want to acknowledge them. Their work is often thankless. They often receive criticism for what they do, but they work very hard, because every dollar we recover for Queenslanders goes back into those jobs and services and infrastructure that Queenslanders require. And that's very important, whether it be more schools, more police officers, better hospitals, better infrastructure, or more affordable housing. I just wanted to update you on an operation that SPUR conducted on the Gold Coast late last year. During that operation, SPUR conducted enforcement activity across suburbs such as Burleigh, Coomera, Southport and Helensvale. And during that operation they seized 54 vehicles. This was a record number of vehicles seized by SPUR through any operation. Now when SPUR officers turn up, sometimes they won't knock on your door, they'll just clamp your vehicle, seize it. But thankfully a number of people were very responsive when the SPUR officers turned up with their FPOS machine. But there are 12 businesses and individuals on the Gold Coast who no longer have a vehicle because they would not comply, and we had to sell those vehicles to recover that money that was owed. I'm very pleased to say that during that short operation on the Gold Coast, SPUR was able to recover $3 million in cash and received a commitment for compliance through compliance payments of $10 million through payment plans. Now they're moving to suburbs across Brisbane. They commenced enforcement yesterday. That enforcement will continue tomorrow, and they will then work their way through other suburbs in the southeast. I also want to give you an update on the debt recovery and compliance program that I initiated in September 2020. I initiated that program in September 2020. That was a short period of time after I became the Treasurer, and that has been an outstanding success. When we launched that program in September 2020, we anticipated recovering $488 million by June 2024. We've absolutely smashed our target. So far we've recovered $541 million. That's $50 million more than we were anticipating, and we've recovered it 18 months in advance of our original deadline. So as I say, I want to thank the SPUR officers for everything that they do. This is money that goes back to Queenslanders. If you owe a debt, if you owe a fine, if you owe a penalty, please pay it, because that money goes back to Queenslanders and helps us deliver better jobs, better services, and of course helps us protect Queensland's great lifestyle. I might get Kim to give a little bit of an overview of the program on the Gold Coast, and then we're happy to take questions on that.
Thank you, Treasurer. Hello, my name is Kim Easton. I'm the Director of SPUR Enforcement. As the Treasurer has said, this week we're commencing operations across Brisbane inner city suburbs such as Milton, Toowong, New Farm, West End and Coorparoo. And we'll be visiting debtors at their homes and places of business and conducting enforcement operations such as clamping and even seizing and selling vehicles to pay down the money that is owed to the people of Queensland. These types of enforcement actions come at the end of a very long process where people have been given many opportunities to pay their debts. And we will use a range of enforcement powers, including taking money from people's bank accounts, garnishing their wages, and seizing and clamping their vehicles. This money that we're collecting is money that is owed to the people of Queensland, including victims of crime, and it pays for things such as schools, roads and hospitals. And it's absolutely critical that if people have a SPUR debt, that they pay that debt. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, happy to take questions on that. Thanks, Kim. Do you want to answer that, Kim?
We have a number of Spur uniform teams as well as support teams. We recently expanded our field enforcement operations under the debt recovery and compliance program that the Treasurer has discussed, setting up a new team in Ipswich, and we'll be shortly setting up new teams in Southport and Maroochydore as well as we expand our operations. These operations we undertake are statewide, so we conduct enforcement activities in and around Brisbane as well as up in the regions. And we've recently, at the end of last year, conducted enforcement operations up in Townsville and Cairns, and we'll be doing similar operations throughout this year. Yeah, our officers work in very challenging situations. As I said, these enforcement operations come at the end of a very long process. This is not usually a surprise to people when we turn up at their home and have a conversation with them about this. But they're oftentimes very aggressive, and we work very closely with the Queensland Police, who provide us with an awful lot of support as we undertake these enforcement operations.
There were record collections last financial year, but the total spur debt increased by about $30 million last calendar year. How are we still growing the spur debt even while we're making these record collections? What's pushing it up?
Yeah, we're very pleased with our record collections last year, just under $300 million. The issue primarily is that more debts have been referred to us for collections. But we have committed to increasing our enforcement operations, and we're undertaking more and more enforcement operations, such as the one we're undertaking this week in the Brisbane inner city, to make sure that people meet their commitments and understand their obligations to pay their debts.
What types of debts, like the mobile phone fines, for example, are they an example of where the debt's being pushed up?
Yeah, exactly. So we get a range of debts. The most common ones are traffic infringements such as speeding and red light cameras, but we're seeing a lot of mobile phone and seatbelt offences coming through to us now.
I imagine your officers are dealing with people who are very desperate as well. You mentioned it can be challenging and dangerous work. What sort of support do you get from police, and how do you handle these volatile situations?
Yeah, first thing I'd like to say is we take officer safety extremely seriously. Our officers are trained by the Queensland Police at the Queensland Academy, and often the Queensland Police will assist us on location when we're undertaking these enforcement activities. But it is very challenging, and the debtors that we deal with can sometimes be quite aggressive. We have had a recent operation where we've been dealing with a sovereign citizen who refused to comply and refused to allow our officers to undertake their enforcement powers. We had a warrant in that case to seize a number of vehicles, and the Queensland Police provided us with significant assistance.
Okay. I just might follow up on that point, Steve. No one has to face enforcement action. You've got two pathways. You can pay your debt straight away, but if you can't afford to pay your debt straight away, you can come into compliance through a repayment plan. And Spur will always engage with those options first before compliance. But what's very disappointing for me as Treasurer is that we have people who run up very significant debts. Some of these debts are owed to victims of crime. You know, I don't understand in certain circumstances why people won't do the right thing, because they're going to help other Queenslanders by paying their debt, their fine or their penalty. Okay, anything else today? Yeah, sure.
The opposition's going to stand up a bit later today and basically demand that there's legislation that people have a look at it so that others can be consulted on it. What's the government's reaction to that?
Well, first thing I'll say about the opposition, this is more whinging and whining from the LNP. And they are the two things that the LNP are absolute gold medalists on, whinging and whining. But there's no action or there's no policy from them in response to significant issues facing Queensland. We're trying to find the balance here between consulting effectively, but also getting on with it, making sure that we deliver the action that Queenslanders want and the action that we want to deliver as a government. So we'll work through all of those issues. As we've said publicly and the Premier's said publicly, the legislation, the draft legislation is currently being drafted, and we will continue to consult with Queenslanders all the way through to and including the introduction of the bill into the Parliament when the Parliament sits in a bit over a week's time.
Could consultation be better? There's like a little website that's hidden on the government's website. It's hard to find. Could the government do better at consultation?
We're finding the balance here between appropriate consultation but also taking action, the action that Queenslanders want when it comes to crime.
The opposition's labelling that website a sham consultation process. What would you say to that?
I don't put any credibility on anything the opposition says. They are entirely unbelievable in this space. They're the people that wasted public money, absolutely roundly condemned by the Auditor-General for some of the mechanisms they put into place when they were in government. So I don't put any credibility on anything an opposition well known for its whinging and whining says about our government's strong action on crime.
How many submissions has the government received through that website?
Oh, I don't know, Jack. I'm not responsible as the Treasurer, but happy to come back to you.
Should we be able to see this legislation before it goes to Parliament?
Queenslanders will see the legislation when it is ready to be released, but Queenslanders know what we're doing. That's the reality. Queenslanders know from December the strong action that we've set out, the action we intend to take, increasing maximum penalties, a whole range of suites of other actions that we intend to take. So Queenslanders know that. This is the mechanism that we're going to use to implement that, and that will be released as soon as the government makes that decision.
Did the Deputy Premier overstep the mark the other day? We had the Law Society come out and be heavily critical that he'd overstepped the mark, that the separation of powers policy was breached. What do you say about that?
Well, I'll just say this. I understand the concerns Queenslanders have about crime. I get it. Everyone in our government gets it. From the Premier through the Ministry, through our backbench. That's why we are taking strong action. But as a former Attorney-General, I need to choose my words carefully, and I need to be careful about what I say. So the matters, the subject of public discussion at the moment, relate to a decision or decisions made by a magistrate in Townsville last Thursday. Now, as I understand it, those matters are now being considered for appeal. So I'm not going to say anything that is going to impact on that process of considering appeal, of enacting or taking action on an appeal, and I'm not going to say anything that's going to potentially impact on the prospects of appeal as a result of those decisions.
Do you think the Miles take it too far then?
Now, I've said my piece. I have to be careful about what I say, and I'm not going to say it again.
Therefore, you wouldn't support publicly that it was a media stunt by the magistrate?
I've made my position clear. Okay, anything else? Righto. You good? Right. No, I think we're still going. We're just waiting for the plane. Anything? Is there anything else?
Sorry, are you trying to distance yourself from what Stephen Miles said?
I need to be very careful about what I say as a former Attorney-General, and I've said what I'm going to say. Anything else? All right. Great, everybody. Thanks very much. All right, we'll see you next week.